Let me tell you how 2 decades of loyalty got me tossed out like yesterday's trash. I'm Marcus. I gave 22 years to that company, late nights, missed holidays, problem-solving that kept whole projects from going under. I wasn't the flashy type. I wasn't in the spotlight. But I was the guy you called when things went sideways. I trained the rookies. I fixed the disasters. I knew that place like the back of my hand. And none of it mattered. The day it happened started like any other, coffee in hand, early at my desk, working through yet another tight deadline. Then I got the message, "Can you step into my office?" From him, the new director, Brandon. Fresh out of grad school, full of buzzwords and spreadsheets. The kind of guy who talks more than he listens. He'd been there 3 months. I'd barely had a conversation with him. I walked in, thinking maybe he needed advice. Instead, he sat across from me with this fake sympathy in his eyes. Like he'd been coached. "Marcus," he said, "you've done good work over the years. No one's questioning that. But we're heading in a new direction. Leaner. Younger. More cost-effective." I just sat there. Silent. Processing. He went on. "We're bringing in fresh talent. People who think differently. People who would cost less." He actually said that. People who cost less. He didn't even look uncomfortable. Just leaned back like this was a routine cleanup. Like cutting me loose was just another line item in his precious budget. I remember gripping the edge of the chair to stop my hands from shaking. I wanted to tell him about the time I worked 70-hour weeks to save a product launch. About the interns who still call me for advice. About the awards my team got under my quiet leadership. But I didn't say a word. I nodded, stood up, shook his hand, and I walked out. The halls felt colder. My office looked smaller. Every photo, every post-it note on my screen suddenly felt like a joke. 22 years. Erased in a 3-minute conversation by a kid who didn't know the first thing about what it takes to hold a company together. I went home that night feeling humiliated, yeah. But more than that, I felt wronged. Betrayed. Like someone had ripped a chapter out of my life and set it on fire. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. But the thing is, I don't scream. I don't break things. I don't beg for second chances. I plan. Stick around because what I did next, it wasn't just payback. It was a masterclass in quiet revenge. They say when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Brandon showed me who he was in 3 minutes. Cold, careless, cocky. He thought he was cleaning house. What he didn't realize was that I was the house. So no, I didn't walk away. Not really. Sure, my keycard stopped working. My inbox was deactivated. HR probably checked off my exit paperwork like it was any other Tuesday. But in my mind, I was still there. Watching. Listening. Planning. You spend over 20 years at a place, you don't just learn the job, you learn how the job works. Who whispers in whose ear? Who actually pulls the strings? Where the skeletons are buried, and who helped bury them. And I had all of it. The first week after I was fired, I let the silence sit. Let the shock wear off. People messaged me. "I can't believe it. You were the heart of the team." What the hell was Brandon thinking? I answered with the same line every time, "It's okay. Things happen." But behind the screen I was taking notes. First thing I did? I logged into a few project tracking tools I still had ghost access to. Brandon was sloppy. When you're young and trying to impress, you cut corners and hope no one notices. I noticed. Turns out, several of the proposals going up to senior leadership had my fingerprints all over them. Entire strategies I drafted, rebranded under new names. Frameworks I created, now being pitched as fresh ideas from the new blood Brandon brought in. Interesting. I also reached out to a few people who still worked there, quiet, loyal folks. Not the loud ones in meetings, but the ones who actually got things done. The ones who respected experience. I didn't have to ask for dirt. It came naturally. "Marcus, he's sinking. He doesn't understand the client relationships. He's cutting the support team down to one guy. He told the board the new team could do twice the work for half the cost. I listened. I didn't react. I asked a few careful questions. When's the next product demo? Are they still using the Westview pitch deck? Every answer helped me sketch the bigger picture. And the picture was ugly. Brandon had walked in thinking he could rebuild the house without a blueprint. And he didn't realize that I was the blueprint. Every process, every client rhythm, every line of code in the back-end workflow, I had touched it, trained it, or tuned it. And now he was trying to run the same machine without the man who knew where the gears jammed. But I wasn't trying to make him fail. That would have been easy and petty. I wasn't after revenge for the sake of pain. I was after balance. So I started laying the groundwork. I knew the quarterly review was coming up. The one where Brandon would be presenting performance metrics to the investors and execs. I also knew those metrics would rely on data that didn't exactly tell the full story. I had receipts, draft reports he'd edited, timelines he'd adjusted, goals that had been quietly scaled down after public announcements. I started compiling them. Not to leak. Not yet. Just to hold. Like cards in a game. Then I made a few strategic calls. One to a mid-tier client whose loyalty I'd earned over years of staying up late to fix what others broke. I asked how things were going. They said things felt different. Less responsive. Sloppy. I didn't badmouth anyone. Just listened. And made sure they knew if they ever needed help, I was still around. I wasn't trying to poach clients. I was planting seeds. Another call went to a former exec who'd left 6 months before Brandon arrived. Someone who respected results over buzzwords. I mentioned some of the things I'd seen. Quietly. Casually. I didn't make accusations. I just asked questions that made him think. Then I let silence do the rest. The beauty of revenge isn't in the noise. It's in the stillness. In knowing you've placed the right pressure in just the right places, and watching the cracks spread. And they did. By week 3, the tone in the messages I got from inside started changing. People weren't just confused now. They were nervous. Brandon's freaking out about the upcoming demo. They promised a delivery date they're not even close to hitting. He keeps asking where the old asset files are. No one knows where anything is. Of course they didn't. Because I built the system. And he never asked me how it worked before cutting me loose. Then came the best part. One of Brandon's new hires, bright kid, but green, reached out to me on LinkedIn. Said he'd heard I was the go-to guy before the change. Asked if I could walk him through how a specific architecture worked. I didn't respond. Just watched. It was like watching someone light a fuse and not realize they're standing in a room full of fireworks. And Brandon? He was still smiling in company posts. Still pushing that new era of innovation garbage. But I knew that smile. I'd seen it before. On people who were bluffing. See, the thing about being underestimated is, it gives you freedom. No one sees you coming when they think you've already left. He thought I was gone. What he didn't know was that I was already 10 moves ahead. It started with silence. The updates stopped coming from Brandon's end. The excited team posts. The fake celebrations. The bragging about streamlined operations. All of it went quiet. That's how you know something's wrong. Not when they scream, but when they stop pretending. The first trap was small. A simple error in the client-facing platform. I knew the flaw would show up eventually. It was a timing issue buried deep in the old framework. I'd flagged it months ago, even had a fix ready. But Brandon's younger, cheaper replacements? They didn't know it existed. The system glitched during a major client demo. The platform stalled mid-presentation. Real-time data froze. One of the VPs watching from New York started asking questions. Not about the glitch, but about the fact that the only guy who could have fixed it had been fired 3 weeks earlier. My name came up. Quietly. I wasn't there, obviously. But word traveled fast. A friend messaged me that afternoon. He looked like someone had yanked the floor out from under him. But next came the investor leak. Not public. Not yet. Just enough smoke to make people start sniffing around. Brandon had repackaged one of my long-term growth models, tweaked a few names, changed a few dates, and pitched it as New Vision. Only, he didn't understand how fragile the model was. It required client trust, retention, stability, things he was losing fast. So I sent a few anonymous tips. To the right inboxes. I didn't lie. I didn't exaggerate. I simply pointed out the inconsistencies between Brandon's projections and the actual numbers. The files were easy to get. I still had backup copies. Within days, 2 mid-level investors paused their next round. Not pulled. Not yet. Just paused. Which, in Brandon's world, might as well have been a bomb. He started scrambling. You could see it in the company's Slack screenshots people sent me. Messages at odd hours. Rewrites of reports that were already approved. A new obsession with data hygiene. He knew something was off. He just didn't know what. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet, watching, measuring every step. I wasn't acting out of rage anymore. That had faded. What I felt now was clarity, focus. It was strange, honestly, how easy it became. How fragile his whole little empire was. For a man who had swaggered in with talk of vision and efficiency, he had no depth, no understanding of the foundation he was standing on. And the more I pulled at the edges, the faster it crumbled. He tried to fix the sinking ship by overworking his team. More deadlines, more pressure, less sleep. That's when the mistakes started piling up. A client renewal went unsigned. An ad campaign missed its launch window. Then came the audit. One of the senior partners, alarmed by the growing silence and performance drops, initiated a quiet internal review. Just a check-in. Bring this at. But I knew what they'd find. Brandon had inflated results from Q1. He'd moved metrics around, repurposed old reports, even padded projections with expected outcomes that had no data to support them. Again, he didn't create anything. He recycled what I'd built and hoped no one would notice. But when you reuse another man's blueprint without understanding it, you eventually hang yourself with the details. I didn't have to leak that part. I just nudged the right person. The person who always respected how I documented everything. They asked questions. The wrong ones at first. Then the right ones. Then the ones Brandon couldn't answer. He started sweating. His team noticed it. I heard from 3 different people that he wasn't the same guy anymore. The confidence was cracked. The arrogance thinned out. He started holding closed-door meetings, trying to reframe narratives. That's what these guys always try to do, reframe. They're not interested in truth. Just perception. But perception only works when no one's pulling back the curtain. And I was pulling. Quietly. Steadily. Every project that failed, every meeting that derailed, every person who left, they all connected to him now. Not me. Not the people before him. That was the goal. Not to make noise. Not to cause chaos. Collapse. Real collapse doesn't happen all at once. It starts small. Hidden. And by the time you feel the floor shift beneath you, the beams are already gone. That's where Brandon was now. I heard he started holding one-on-one meetings with staff. Asking about loyalty. About who might be working against him. He was paranoid. He should have been. But the funniest part? He never once suspected me. Not seriously. Because in his mind I was gone. Irrelevant. Too old. Too expensive. He underestimated the one thing he never understood, quiet experience. I didn't need a title. I didn't need access. I didn't need to shout. All I needed was time. And now? Time was running out. He started asking questions. He just never asked the right person. That was his last mistake. It happened on a Tuesday. Just after lunch. A warm, cloudless day. I was sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the wind move through the trees when my phone buzzed. 3 messages. All saying the same thing. It's out. I opened the link. A headline stared back at me in bold, unforgiving letters. Tech director accused of misleading investors and manipulating performance data. Underneath it, Brandon's photo. That smug, overconfident face now pale under office lighting. He looked caught. Because he was. The article detailed everything. Inflated Q1 results. Falsified reports. Manipulated forecasts. Even a shady hiring push that raised flags with HR. No one used my name. I never left fingerprints. But my hands had shaped the whole thing. Every leak. Every tip. Every whisper. The journalists ran with it. So did the investors. And then the board. By Friday, Brandon was suspended. By Monday, he was gone. No farewell post. No crafted statement. Just a cold announcement. Effective immediately, Brandon Wells is no longer with the company. The comments section lit up. He always seemed off. Karma. He ran out the people who built this place. Now look. I didn't gloat. Not outwardly. I just exhaled. Long dude. Like I'd been holding that breath since the day he told me I was done. Truth is, I didn't hate the man. Not really. What I hated was what he represented. The arrogance. The greed. The belief that loyalty is disposable and wisdom can be replaced with flash. And he paid for it. Clients walked. Investors pulled. Morale tanked. The company had to publicly distance itself. We are implementing stronger controls, they said. We take integrity seriously. Funny. They didn't say that when they pushed me out to save a few bucks. But the most satisfying part? He finally figured it out. A mutual contact sent me a message. He asked if you were behind it. I didn't answer. Just watched him go pale. I pictured the moment. Him, piecing it all together. Realizing every misstep, every loss, every unraveling thread, led back to the man he fired without a second thought. I didn't need revenge that screamed. I just needed one that echoed. And it did. Loud enough to ruin him. The company survived. Barely. But it was changed. Stripped of its shine. Investors were cautious. Staff turnover hit hard. The culture he tried to modernize crumbled with him. As for me, I didn't go back. I didn't want to. What I wanted, what I needed, was to walk away on my terms. Not in shame. Not in silence. But in control. I rebuilt. Quietly. Took some consulting work. Reconnected with people who still valued experience. Integrity. The kind of people who knew that cheaper wasn't always better, and younger wasn't always wiser. Did it cost me anything? A few friendships that couldn't take the tension. I spent long nights questioning if I'd gone too far. If revenge made me small. But the truth? It didn't. Because this wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was justice. I gave everything to that place. Years. Ideas. My name. And when someone tried to erase that for profit, I didn't scream. I strategized. And I won. There was one final message. From Brandon himself. Sent days after his fall. All it said was it you? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He already knew. He just wanted confirmation. A lifeline. A reason. But some people don't deserve closure. They deserve the silence they gave you. So, I deleted the message. And I let him sit with it. That was the last move. He wanted me gone so he could save a few dollars. Turns out, it cost him everything. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. There's more where that came from.